Hey, what's up guys? Today we have another very special video where I'm going to bring you guys Kinich footage, gameplay, and also my general thoughts on him, first impressions, build advice, and also a rundown of his different teams and a showcase of different teams in action. Now, this is obviously recorded before Kinich comes out on a creator experience server, so a special thanks to them for allowing me to play Kinich early and post this early. Now, as always, I will also make a complete and detailed guide covering everything you need to know about Kinich coming out next when he releases on the live servers. But for now, here's what you need to know about Kinich, how he plays, what he does, his different teams, and how he performs in combat, because genuinely he is very unique, unlike other characters playstyle wise, very fun, and also quite strong. Alright, so starting things off, let me explain to you guys what Kinich actually does, give you a quick rundown on his kit before showing you his gameplay and teams in action. So firstly, Kinich is honestly a very unique but also quite straightforward DPS. His main source of damage is his elemental skill, which is unlike anything else we've ever seen. It is effectively a grappling hook, an ability that'll grapple onto a nearby opponent or object that can be attacked, grappling onto them and then swinging around them as you press your normal attacks. Each normal attack will make you swing in a direction that you can choose. You can hold an arrow key while you're attacking to kind of control how you swing, and you'll just be firing shots, pew-pewing at an enemy, dwindling away at their HP. Throughout your skill's 10-second duration, you will be in a Night Soul Blessing state, which is the new mechanic unique to Natlan characters. And inside of this, not only will you be swinging around and shooting enemies, but you will also be able to recast your skill for a huge hit of damage. As you can see at town level 9, the scaling is almost 1200. It is a big sort of mini nuke of damage that you can do multiple times inside of a skill press. In fact, you can press your skill again once you generate enough Night Soul points, 20 Night Soul points to be exact, and you generate these Night Soul points in a few different ways. You'll basically just passively get them as your basic attacking enemies, just through your normal attacks, but you will also get more Night Soul points if the enemies you're fighting take burning or burgeon damage, making them synergize with pyro quite nicely, and you will also get more Night Soul points if you can get into these glowing fields called blind spots that will appear in your skill as you're grappling and shooting enemies. You also gain a little bit of Night Soul passively as time goes on, 2 per second. This is something that I will cover in more detail with more exact rotation advice in my complete guide coming out next, but for now, know that basically he's someone who will just grapple onto an enemy, swing around as he does normal attacks, going in a circle or whichever direction you choose, dealing okay amount of chip damage and then a big burst shot of damage when your Night Soul points are maxed out, happening around 3 or 4 times per skill press. Additionally, you get these more often against burning or burgeoned enemies, and so naturally, Kinich is a character who synergizes with pyro supports, which is unlike most other Dendro characters, except maybe Emily and kind of Nahida, which is really cool, especially given that the Pyro Archon is right around the corner. I do also want to point out that Kinich does, as mentioned, synergize very well with Bennett. I want to re-emphasize that to kind of say that a lot of his best teams, at least right now, will run Bennett, who is a popular unit. Obviously, most people have him. He's a 4.0, but your other teams may want him. So while Kinich doesn't need Bennett, and there's definitely some Bennett-less teams, he does benefit from the huge attack buff and healing that Bennett provides you with, on top of being a Pyro character. So keep in mind that a lot of Kinich teams will have Bennett, as he can really make use of the huge buffs that he gives you. Outside of just that, Kinich's elemental burst is one that summons a dragon that will deal a pretty solid amount of passive AoE damage as your Kinich is grappling about. Keep in mind that this burst is something that isn't the main part of your kit. Your skill will be more damage than your burst, but it is a nice bonus amount of damage that also has a much bigger AoE than your skill. And inside of its animation, you can also gain Night Soul points, so using it inside of your skill can actually be beneficial, as instead of eating away at your skill's duration, it actually will extend it, and you'll also be able to stack up Night Soul points through things like your passive as enemies are burning, stuff like that, without feeling like you're wasting your skill's uptime by using your burst. Kinich will also gain quite a bit of damage as party members trigger Night Soul bursts, increasing one of his skills' cannon shot damage. Now, outside of just exactly what he does though, Kinich is also someone who can kind of grapple around in midair, have a lower cooldown on his grapple if you're not actually hitting an enemy, be very mobile in that sense, so cool for exploration, but also have a very mobile and unique playstyle when it comes to fighting enemies as well. Because of this, Kinich is a main DPS unlike anyone we've seen, on top of the fact that he also synergizes very well with the burning reaction or burgeon as well, which makes him a completely different entity, at least team-wise, as other prevalent Dendro DPSs like Alhaitham or Tichnari. And so to elaborate a bit on this, I think Kinich has a very unique gameplay loop. Obviously, you still have set up all your support abilities and then go to your main DPS, which is Kinich, but you're going to use your skill targeting one enemy, grappling around them, and then inside of your skill, you can kind of choose which way to go. You also have some interruption resistance inside of your skill. It's not the most, you can still get knocked around by heavy attacks, but it is nice. And not only are you focused on dealing damage and pressing your skill whenever it's up, stacking it up as fast as possible, you are also at the same time trying to get into these lit up zones that appear in order to get more Night Night Soul points and therefore get more skill presses, more cannon shots to do more damage. Kinich's damage does have some AoE if the enemies are all grouped up, especially with his burst, but a lot of his skill is single target, or at least has a very small AoE. Like if a lot of enemies are grouped up, as I said, you can hit them all with your cannon blast, as you can see here in this domain, so really nice. But he does excel in single target situations because a lot of his skills damage, which is the main part of his kit, mind you, doesn't have the biggest AoE. So if enemies aren't like super grouped or whatever, then you may be doing mostly single target damage. So keep that in mind. He has some AoE. There's ways to play around it, but he's not the most AoE driven character like someone like Neuvillette is. With that in mind though, his damage has been quite impressive to me at least. He's definitely on par with other Dendro DPSs. He's a very solid main DPS option, just damage wise, has good numbers from his skill, but once again, isn't someone who I think is a game breaking character, at least as of right now. While I do think he's a good main DPS, I also believe that he's someone who will have much more synergy with future Natlan units, similarly to Moalani. While he does have good teams right now, has great synergy with someone like Bennett and also Emily, who likes being ran in a burning team. You could also get huge buffs with someone like Farina, and again, I'll get into a team showcase a bit later in this video. It is very clear that he will synergize well with Natlan characters, not just because of his passive, where he'll synergize well with Night Soul bursts, which trigger more often the more Natlan characters are in your party, but also and especially because he can definitely use a solid off-field pyro support, who the Pyro Archon may very well be. Obviously, we don't know what she does and if Kinich will even synergize with her, but it is very likely to assume that kits that revolve around a pyro reaction, these new Natlan main DPSs that synergize with burning in Kinich's case or vaporize in Moalani's case, can use a strong off-field pyro support, which is what I believe the Pyro Archon will be, but obviously I could be wrong. Also, one of the main reasons why she'll likely be good with Kinich, or at least why he's waiting for a support character that can help him, is because of the new hero set. I mentioned this with Moalani, but also with Kinich, where this new hero support set is so broken that having a character from Natlan who can trigger its effect and buff your team accordingly can be so pivotal to the team's damage. The reason for this is because this new hero set will give you 12% elemental damage bonus to all party members of an element related to any reaction that's triggered, even from off field. Now, while 12% damage bonus may not seem that good, and honestly it's still decent, it goes up to a 40% damage bonus if the character triggering this is in the Night Soul's blessing state, meaning that any Natlan support will automatically have a set that can give 40% elemental damage bonus to any elements in any reaction that's triggered. Now, what this means is that let's say the Pyro Archon comes out and they're a pyro support, but just another character, for example, that is from Natlan and is a support, if they can trigger the burning reaction, they will not only buff Pyro, giving a 40% Pyro damage bonus to the whole party, but they'll also buff Dendro, buffing your Kinich's damage on top of whatever else they have in their kit that may or may not already make them a good support. Additionally, this buff lasts for 20 seconds, which is huge, and you can buff multiple elements at the same time through multiple different reactions, meaning that you could effectively buff any party member that's dealing damage. Now, the reason why you can't just throw this on to someone like Kachina in a Kinich team right now is because while I absolutely recommend this set on Kachina, and I even ran Kachina with Moalani, and it worked quite well as a low investment option, with Kinich, since he's Dendro, obviously Geo and Dendro have no reaction together, and since there's no Geo-Dendro reaction, although I think Mossy Rock would be sick, Kinich definitely will benefit from a future Pyro support, or even just any element that can synergize with Dendro in order to give him this 40% damage bonus, and probably also just be a good addition to the team in other ways as well. While no supports right now can run hero with Kinich, so obviously it'll be great when he gets a support that can, it is still worth noting that he synergizes very well with support characters who can run the Deepwood memory set to reduce the Dendro resistance of enemies by 30%, which is really big for your damage. This obviously can be ran on other Dendro supports, but can also and especially be ran on just generic support characters whose skill deals damage from off field. This can be someone like Dea, who has a nice pyro field, or Zhongli, whose pillar will constantly hit enemies. With these options and many other options that are out right now, being able to run a set like Deepwood to buff Kinich on top of anything else they already provide him with. So keep in mind that a set like this is important to run if you can make it work, as it will increase Kinich's damage. And so for those reasons, I think as a main DPS, Kinich definitely has pros and cons. He's not game breaking if you just want the most meta character. Neuvillette is right there, but Kinich is solid, and in my opinion up there as one of the stronger DPSs, a really solid option who shines in single target but also has some AoE if you know what you're doing, and also through your burst. He's a character who relies on his elemental skill, has a unique playstyle, and I think will get better as future characters are released. Obviously this is true about a lot of characters, but in particular for characters of a new region at the start of said region, and especially in Natlan, because so many characters rely on other characters' Night Soul bursts. There's the hero set, the Archon's not even out yet, a lot of signs that point towards characters like Kinich and Moalani getting better in the future, while already already being solid DPS options right now. With that said, I do believe Kinich does already have some solid team options. I think he synergizes well with characters like Emily, Bennett, Farina, Dea, and a few others that I'll cover in my Kinich guide coming out next, so stay tuned for that for more in-depth information. But even now, I am very happy with his unique and fun playstyle and pretty impressive damage, all things considered. Please don't feel forced to get him, as with DPS characters, it's really hard to give an objective recommendation unless they are absolutely game-breaking. Now, outside of just that, it is worth pointing out that Kinich has good room for vertical investment. His C1, C2, and also signature weapon are all pretty solid increases to his personal damage, while already being solid at C0. Additionally, he's very straightforward to build. He ascends with crit damage, which is nice, and runs the new, pretty broken Obsidian Codex set, which is probably going to be a staple on so many Natlan characters. This set is insane, gives you so much crit rate, and is what you should be farming, while also having some other viable options, which again I'll cover in my guide. Additionally, he has a good free-to-play weapon option with the new Blacksmith Craftable that we got one copy of through the web event, but can also obviously refine for free, provided you have the prototypes to do so. Now, with that in mind, I want to get to probably the most important part of this video, or at least my favorite part, which is going to be showcasing Kinich's teams. So I'm going to give you guys a brief rundown on the different teams that Kinich can run, or at least the ones that I have chosen to run him with. I'm going to show you some teams, show them in action, and talk about my thoughts on them. Firstly, to keep things kind of straightforward, the teams that I found where he synergizes the most are firstly burning teams, running a pyro character and then genuinely just flexible slots. Emily is a solid dendro option, but there's others, and the last slot is entirely flexible. While Kinich doesn't need more interruption resistance, it definitely still helps because getting knocked around while you're grappling is annoying, so having a shielder or someone like Dea can be quite nice. They can also run the Deepwood set, which helps quite a lot. Now, I believe burning is going to be the main synergy. There's going to be a lot of different burning variations with Kinich, some that also include Burgeon, like notably running Kinich with Farina, Bennett, and then another pyro character who can trigger Burgeon, Dea, Toma, or whatever. You can also run more traditional Burgeon teams, and even Hyperbloom. While Hyperbloom doesn't synergize too well with Kinich's kit, obviously it looks like he wants to synergize with Burning and Burgeon, and he does. Hyperbloom is just so good, and Kinich works as a dendro driver to where a team like this can work, running Kinich with a Hydro and Electro unit, and then a last slot that can be almost anything. For the most part, however, he synergizes with Burning and Burgeon, and can benefit from buffers such as Bennett, Farina, and others. And I really do like that while some of his supports are meta, like Bennett's a popular character, he is a dendro main DPS that makes use of teams that otherwise are kind of neglected. Like there aren't really many Burning carries or even Burgeon carries for that matter. Yes, some Burgeon teams can be good. Yes, Burning with Emily can actually be quite good, but she's just a support, and she also works well with Kinich, who is making dendro and pyro work together, having completely different teams from other meta dendro DPSs like Alhaitham or Tichnari, who are much more focused around Quicken and Quick Bloom teams. All right, now moving on, let's do a small showcase of Kinich's multiple different teams in action, and keep in mind that for a full showcase of Kinich in the Spiral Abyss, this will be included in my next video, my complete guide, when he's out on the live servers. For now though, here's Kinich in a burning team, just doing some random domains, and as you can see, not only is the damage just genuinely pretty good, or actually very good, but also, in my opinion, he's very fun to play. Now, there's some jank attached to certain parts of the grapple. Sometimes I've noticed I'll get stuck while sliding, notably against like a boss enemy, but for the most part, trying to run into the lit areas on the ground, being able to choose which direction you're going, and spinning from enemy to enemy has been really fun. Burning teams I've enjoyed obviously the most, but also probably as much and sometimes even more has been a burning team where Farina's included, which technically makes it Burgeon, but not really, as Farina's damage bonus is greatly appreciated. She's also just a good unit, and as you can see, the team does perform very well. Kinich just does really good damage as a solid dendro carry who can actually make use of different teams than the other dendro carries like Alhaitham, as mentioned in the video, which is something that I really like. With that said though, even in something like a generic Hyperbloom team, which you're seeing now, while his personal damage won't be as high, it's still fine, and he's a dendro driver for that team. His skills shots count as normal attacks, so he can trigger someone like Xingqiu or Yelan, apply Hydro, apply Dendro, and have an Electro Hyperbloomer who will all be doing good damage. Obviously, this isn't like his premier team, but it's another viable option that I find pretty cool. I do suspect that Kinich is a character from Natlan who I will be playing for a long time, but for a more in-depth analysis, my thoughts on him, his place in the meta, and more in-depth build stuff, do wait for him to release on the live version and my complete guide to be out. Obviously, it's not even day one, so this is just really early first impressions, which may change. It's hard to evaluate a character this early on, but as I said, I do like him. He's not a must pull or anything like that, but a solid DPS option who has a new playstyle that you may or may not find enjoyable, and I do. And so yeah, thanks so much for watching. Those are my thoughts on Kinich, as well as a small showcase and everything else. I'm very excited for him to release. I'm glad I got to give you guys an early video, and I'll get ready to work on the guide so that it isn't as delayed as, well, Lonnie's was. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and as always, I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.